I was holding a glass of champagne I hadn't asked for, wearing a dress I almost didn't pack, standing at the edge of a dance floor that had nothing to do with me. That's the honest beginning of this story. Not a grand entrance. Not a moment of lightning. Just me. Slightly overdressed, slightly tired, slightly wondering why I had agreed to come to the wedding of a woman I had met exactly twice at a conference in Boston 2 years before. The answer, if I'm being truthful, was Fernanda. It was always Fernanda. She had called me on a Thursday afternoon the way she always called, without warning, voice already mid-sentence before I even said hello, as if our conversations never really started, just resumed from wherever we'd left off the last time. Samira, tell me you don't have plans next Saturday. I have plans next Saturday. You don't. I do. You were going to reorganize your closet. A pause. She knew me too well. She always knew me too well. That counts as plans, I said. It counts as avoidance, she said. Come with me to this wedding. It's in Connecticut. It'll be beautiful. You'll eat something that isn't cereal for dinner and talk to humans who are not your laptop. I said no. She texted me the hotel address 11 minutes later. I packed a dress. That's how it always worked between us. That's how it had always worked for 6 years of friendship that had somehow become the most consistent thing in my life, without either of us ever deciding that it would be. Fernanda Dutra appeared in my world the way certain songs appear, without announcement, already playing, already inside you before you've had a chance to decide whether you want to listen. And I went to the wedding. That was my first mistake. No, that's not right. That's not fair to what this story is. My first mistake wasn't going. My first mistake was thinking I already knew what Fernanda was to me. Thinking that 6 years of knowing someone means you've finished the work of understanding them. Thinking that the word friend was a complete sentence. I was holding a glass of champagne I hadn't asked for. I was watching the bride and her wife dance their first dance to a song I didn't recognize, but that made something in my chest pull sideways in a way I couldn't quite explain. I was standing next to Fernanda, our arms almost touching in the way our arms were always almost touching. That particular distance between us, familiar as breathing, that I had never once stopped to measure. And she leaned in, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something warm. Something that always made me think of late evenings and open windows. And she whispered something into my ear. I didn't fully catch it over the music. I turned to look at her. She was already looking at me, which was the thing I hadn't expected. Not the words, but the fact that when I turned, she was already there, already watching, with something in her expression that I couldn't name, and had, without realizing it, been afraid to look for. What? I said. She smiled, and for one fractured second, she looked like a woman who was about to do something that couldn't be undone. I told myself later that I was imagining things. I wasn't. 6 years is a long time to know someone without knowing them completely. But that's not exactly what happened with Fernanda and me. It wasn't that I didn't know her. It was that I knew her the way you know a room you've lived in for so long that you stop noticing the way the light changes in the afternoon, the way certain corners feel different in winter, the way the silence in that room is different from the silence in every other room you've ever been in. I knew Fernanda. I just didn't know what that knowing meant. We met at 32. I was a year into a job at an architecture firm in New York that I had wanted very badly at 28, and that I had stopped being able to explain my commitment to somewhere around 31. Fernanda was a landscape designer who had moved from Sao Paulo to Boston 6 years before, who had built a small but respected practice, and who had appeared at a panel I was moderating about urban green space at a conference I had almost canceled on because of a deadline. I remember thinking, when she sat down at the panelist table, that she seemed like someone who had decided exactly who she was going to be and had simply gone about being it without much drama. She had that quality, a kind of settled confidence that wasn't arrogance, that wasn't performance. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, it was worth having waited. After the panel, she found me at the coffee station and said, "You're a better moderator than you think you are." It was such a specific thing to say. Not great panel or really enjoyed that. You're a better moderator than you think you are. As if she had spent the last 90 minutes watching not just what I did, but what I thought of what I was doing. "How do you know what I think?" I said. "You flinch a little when you don't ask a follow-up question," she said, completely unbothered. "Like you're second-guessing yourself in real time. You shouldn't. Your instincts are right." I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not sure anyone had ever looked at me that carefully before. "Fernanda," she said, and held out her hand. "Samira," I said, and shook it. That was a Thursday in October. By Sunday, we had exchanged numbers, had dinner twice, and had one of those conversations that you can only have with certain people, the kind that move so quickly through layers that by the end you feel slightly disoriented, like you surfaced from deep water too fast. She flew back to Boston. I went back to New York. We started texting. 6 years later, she was my closest friend. I'm not sure when that happened exactly. It was the accumulation of things, rather than any single event. The phone calls that started at 9 p.m. and ended at 1 in the morning. The long weekends in each other's cities that became a kind of ritual. I would take the train to Boston in spring. She would come to New York in fall. And somewhere in the middle of those trips, there was always a Saturday that felt more like real life than actual real life felt. The habit of telling each other things we didn't tell other people. The knowledge of how the other person takes their coffee, how they sound when they're trying to seem fine and aren't, what they need when they say they don't need anything. We were not the kind of friends who talked every day. We were the kind of friends for whom the conversation was always continuous. It just paused sometimes, for weeks, for months, and then resumed exactly where it had left off, as if time were a formality we'd both agreed to ignore. I trusted her completely. That, I think, is the important thing to understand. Not just that I loved her. I did love her. I had always loved her, in the way that felt entirely natural and uncomplicated, in the way that the best friendships feel natural and uncomplicated. But more than that, I trusted her. I trusted her read of things. I trusted her instincts about people, about situations, about me. When Fernanda looked at something and said what she thought, I paid attention, which is part of what made what happened at the wedding so disorienting. Because Fernanda looked at me at that wedding and said something, or did something, that I couldn't file away in any category I already had for her, and I had spent 6 years building categories for her. Careful, specific, well-organized categories that explained exactly what we were to each other and exactly why that was enough. The categories turned out to be wrong. Not the caring, not the history, not the 6 years of showing up, of late-night calls, of knowing each other with the particular intimacy of chosen people. That was all real. That was all exactly what I thought it was. But the categories were too small. I just didn't know that yet. Not standing at that coffee station at 32. Not even standing at the edge of that dance floor in Connecticut 6 years later, holding a glass of champagne, watching 2 women slow dance to a song I didn't know. I thought I was watching someone else's love story. I wasn't paying attention to mine. Let me tell you about the version of my life that existed before I understood any of this. I was, by most observable metrics, doing well. I had left the architecture firm 2 years before the wedding and had gone independent. Smaller projects, more autonomy, significantly more anxiety, but also the particular satisfaction of work that felt genuinely mine. I had an apartment in Brooklyn that I had spent 2 years making exactly right, with good light and bookshelves I'd built with my own hands, and a kitchen that I actually cooked in. I had friendships I valued. I had routines that worked. I had been in a relationship that ended 14 months before the wedding. 3 years with a woman named Diane who was smart and kind, and who I had, at various points, been genuinely happy with, and who I had also, at various points, looked at across a dinner table, and felt a distance I didn't know how to close. We parted on honest terms. She said she felt like we wanted different things. I said I thought she was right. We meant it, both of us. After Diane, I didn't date, not seriously. I told myself this was a choice about priorities, about building the independent practice, about giving myself time, which was true, as far as it went. But there was something else underneath it that I hadn't looked at closely. A feeling that the shape I'd been trying to fit hadn't fit, that I'd been building something with good materials and real effort, and it had come out slightly wrong, slightly off. And I wasn't entirely sure if the problem was the materials, or the blueprint, or something about the way I understood what I was building toward. I didn't examine this very carefully. I was busy. I was good at being busy. Fernanda, when she called, would sometimes ask me what I'd done that week that wasn't work, and I would tell her, and she would say, "Samira," in this specific, particular way that managed to be both gentle and completely devastating. "I'm fine," I would say. "I know you're fine," she would say. "I'm asking if you're happy." Those aren't different things. They really are. She had this quality, this refusal to let me hide inside confidence. I could be very convincing about being fine. I had years of practice. But Fernanda never seemed to be fooled by it, and she also never pushed in a way that felt like pressure. She would just say the true thing, name it, clearly, without drama, and then let me sit with it. I would sit with it, and then change the subject, and she would let me, because she also knew when to let me. That's the thing about a friendship that's real. It knows your shape. Not just the shape you show, but the one underneath. Fernanda knew my shape. I thought I knew hers. I was wrong about one thing, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The wedding was for a woman named Rachel, whom Fernanda knew through a mutual friend in the Boston landscape design world, one of those connections that spans cities and industries and ends up producing an invitation to a Saturday afternoon wedding in a renovated barn in Connecticut because life is strange and people collect each other in unexpected ways. I don't know Rachel very well, Fernanda admitted when I asked on the train up. But she invited me and I said yes before I thought about it. And now I'm going, and I didn't want to go alone. "You have other friends," I said. "I have other friends," she agreed, "but I wanted to go with you." She said it simply, the way she said most things. Like it was a fact, not a sentiment. Like wanting to be with me was just a piece of observable reality that didn't require softening or qualification. I looked out the train window. Connecticut in early October, the trees already turning, that particular rust and gold that feels like the world is slowly lighting itself on fire. "It's going to be beautiful," I said. "It already is," she said. I thought she was talking about the trees. The barn was beautiful. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly beautiful. The kind of space that had been transformed with intelligence and care, with flowers everywhere that seemed chosen rather than arranged, with candlelight that turned everything warm and slightly uncertain. The ceremony was short and honest, and made 3 people near me cry, which is the best thing a wedding ceremony can do. Fernanda cried a little. I noticed this because I always noticed things about Fernanda without quite meaning to. The way she held herself slightly differently when she was moved by something. The way she pressed her lips together and looked up slightly to the left. The particular way she took a breath when she was trying not to let something show. I had cataloged all of this without ever deciding to. It had accumulated the way knowledge accumulates when you pay close attention to something for a long time. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception space. There was a band. There was very good food. There was champagne that appeared in my hand from somewhere, and that I drank because I needed something to do with my hands. We found a spot near the edge of the dance floor, not quite in the middle of things, not quite removed from them. That liminal position that Fernanda always seemed to navigate instinctively, present but not performing presence. I was next to her. Our arms were almost touching. The first dance started. The song was something I should probably know but didn't. Slow, with a piano line that seemed to repeat itself slightly differently each time it came around. The two brides moved together the way you can only move with someone you've been moving with long enough that the steps are behind thought, that the body just knows. I watched them and felt something pull sideways in my chest. I couldn't name it then. I couldn't name it as love or longing or recognition. I just felt it, that lateral pull, that slight pressure behind the sternum, the way the room seemed to get both clearer and less certain at the same time. I want that someday, I said, without meaning to, without thinking about whether I meant to. Fernanda didn't respond immediately. I turned to look at her and found her already looking at me. Not at the dance floor, at me. What? I said, because there was something in her expression that I didn't know how to read, and I had been reading Fernanda's expressions for 6 years. She smiled. It was not quite her usual smile. It was smaller, and it held something I hadn't seen before. Or maybe had seen and hadn't let myself register. Nothing, she said. But it wasn't nothing. It was clearly not nothing. And the fact that she said it was nothing, she who almost never lied to me and never pretended, made it land in my chest as if she'd said something much larger. I looked back at the dance floor. My arm was touching hers now. One of us had shifted. I didn't know which. I didn't move away. She didn't either. The song kept going. The bride and her wife kept moving. The candlelight kept doing what candlelight does, making everything look like a question about what comes next. I held my champagne. I watched. I tried not to think about why the particular warmth of Fernanda's arm against mine felt like the most solid thing in the room. I was not very successful. Here is what I told myself on the train back to New York. Nothing happened. That was the truth, technically. Nothing happened at the wedding. We stayed until 9. We said goodbye to Rachel and her wife. We shared a cab to the train station. We took the same train back because it made sense geographically. We sat across from each other in a quiet car, and Fernanda fell asleep 20 minutes outside of New Haven with her head tilted against the window, and I watched the Connecticut dark go by and told myself, very deliberately and very firmly, that nothing had happened. She had looked at me. That was all. She looked at me all the time. That was just Fernanda. That particular quality of attention she gave to people she cared about. That way of making you feel entirely visible without it being intrusive. I had been the recipient of that attention for 6 years. It didn't mean anything different now. I was projecting. I was being affected by the wedding, by the romance of the occasion, by 2 glasses of champagne on what turned out to have been a fairly light lunch. Nothing happened. I believed this completely for approximately 4 days. Then she called. It was a Tuesday. I was at my desk, halfway through a schematic drawing that wasn't working, surrounded by the specific chaos of a project in the middle stages, where everything looks worse before it looks better. My phone rang. I answered on the second ring because I always answered when Fernanda called. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. A pause. Not the comfortable kind. "How was the rest of your week?" she asked. "Fine, busy, same. How was yours?" "Also fine, also busy." Another pause. This was not how we talked. We talked over each other. We interrupted. We started sentences and abandoned them because the other person already knew where they were going. We did not have polite, careful pauses. We did not ask each other how our weeks were in the tone you use with someone you've just met. "Fernanda," I said. "Samira," she said. "Are you okay?" A longer pause this time. "I'm thinking about something," she said. "Can I ask what?" "Not yet," she said. "I don't have words for it yet." "Okay," I said. "Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay." "Thank you," she said. And then, "I liked being at the wedding with you." I liked it too, I said. Okay, she said. Okay. We hung up. I sat at my desk for a full minute afterward, and did not look at my schematic, and did not think about the drawing, and thought instead about the way her voice had sounded on that phone call. Careful in a way it wasn't usually careful. Deliberate in a way that felt like she was choosing each word the way you choose steps on unsteady ground. She was thinking about something. I was thinking about something. I did not examine too carefully whether the somethings were the same thing. The thing is, I had been in friendships before. I had had close friendships, meaningful friendships, friendships that felt like real intimacy. I was not naive about the difference between friendship love and romantic love. I had been in enough of both to understand that the line between them is real, even if it can be blurry, even if it shifts. What I hadn't been in, what I'd never quite been in, was a friendship that sat right at that line for 6 years, without either of us ever looking at it directly. I thought about this, in the days after that phone call, with the careful detachment of someone who is very deliberately not thinking about a thing, while thinking about it extremely carefully. I thought about the accumulation of small facts, the fact that when something good happened to me, my first instinct was to tell Fernanda. Not my family, not my other friends, not my closest colleague. Fernanda. Not because she was the most excited or the most effusive, she wasn't particularly, but because her response to things was always exactly what the thing needed, never more and never less, and because hearing her voice process something made me understand it better. The fact that when I was sick last winter, with something that wasn't serious but that knocked me flat for a week, she had sent soup from a restaurant in Boston. Actual soup, in a container, via a service she'd researched specifically to find one that delivered across state lines, with a note that said only, "Eat this and don't be a martyr about it." The fact that I had, more than once, had the experience of being in someone else's company and thinking about a conversation I wanted to have with Fernanda. The fact that her laugh was... I stopped myself here, at this fact, and looked at it for a moment before putting it carefully back where I'd found it. These were all facts of friendship. They were friendship facts. They were exactly the kinds of things that people feel for their close friends. Except that I had had close friends before. And with none of them had I ever had this particular experience of being in a room and knowing exactly where the other person was in it, of having my nervous system register, without any visible input from my conscious mind, the precise location and orientation of another body in space. I noticed this because I'd been noticing it for a long time without calling it anything. After the wedding, I called it something. I called it nothing. Still nothing. But a different kind of nothing. The kind that has a shape. The kind you can feel the edges of. The nothing you say when you know that saying something would change everything, and you're not ready for everything to change. She came to New York 3 weeks after the wedding. This was planned before the wedding. A standing fall visit that we'd already confirmed the dates for. She was coming for a long weekend. I had made a list, which I always did, of things I thought she might want to do. A show at a gallery she'd mentioned. A restaurant that had opened near her old neighborhood. The particular afternoon light in Central Park in mid-October that I thought she'd respond to as a person who worked with landscape. I looked at the list the night before she arrived and noticed that I had been more thorough than usual. More careful. I'd included backup options, weather contingencies, 3 different dinner possibilities, based on what mood she might be in. I was making plans as if something was at stake. Nothing is at stake, I told myself. I went to sleep. I didn't sleep very well. She arrived on a Friday afternoon, rolling a small bag that I recognized from at least 4 other visits, looking slightly tired from the train the way she always looked slightly tired from travel, and then recovered so quickly it was almost disorienting. "Hi," she said, at my door. "Hi," I said. She hugged me. the way she always hugged me, arms around my shoulders, solid and unhesitating, the particular steadiness of a person who gives affection without performing it. I hugged her back. The hug lasted the same amount of time it always lasted. I was aware of it lasting. That was new. I had hugged Fernanda hundreds of times over 6 years. I had never been aware of the hug while it was happening. Not as a specific, measurable event, not as something happening to my body, not as something I would remember the particular temperature of later. I stepped back. She was smiling. That specific smile she had when she was happy to be somewhere, easy and uncomplicated. "You look good," she said. "You look tired," I said. "I look tired and good," she said. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." I laughed. She came inside. She put her bag down in the spot she always put it, in the corner of the hallway where there was a narrow table she'd once remarked would be a good place for a bag. And she'd been right, and I'd started leaving space there. We had dinner at the first restaurant on the list. She ordered for herself, and then looked at the menu for approximately 12 additional seconds, and ordered something for me without asking. And it was the right thing, and I didn't comment on this because we both knew she'd been doing this for years, and it was always the right thing. We talked. The conversation moved the way it always moved, through work, through a book she'd been reading, through something she'd heard at a conference that she wanted to argue with, through my project that wasn't working and why it wasn't working. She listened to the project problem the way she listened to everything, fully present, head slightly tilted, letting me talk until I ran out of words before saying anything herself. "The floor plan is fighting you because you're trying to make it something it isn't," she said. "What does that mean?" "You're designing around the view, but the view is east-facing, and the client wants a morning reading room. Those are the same direction. You don't need to route around the view. You need to route toward it differently." I sat with that for a moment. "That's it," I said. "I know," she said. "How did you know that from 2 sentences?" "Because I know how you think," she said. "You always fight yourself when you're fighting the problem. When you get out of your own way, the answer's usually already there." I looked at her across the table. The restaurant light was warm and low, and she was sitting with the particular ease that she had in rooms she felt comfortable in. And she was looking at me in that way she had, like looking was something she did with her full attention, like there was nothing else currently worth looking at. I said, "You're very good at seeing things." She said, "Only the things I care about." We looked at each other. 1 second, 2, 3. I looked away first. I picked up my glass and drank and said something about the wine, and she said something back, and we moved on. Both of us, as if neither of us had been there in that particular second. But I was there, and I think she was there. And later, when I was lying in my bed and she was in the guest room and I was staring at the ceiling the way I hadn't stared at a ceiling since I was in my 20s and too full of something unnamed to sleep, I thought about that second. I thought about the way she said only the things I care about. I thought about the fact that she was 20 feet away and my chest felt like it was doing something complicated. Fernanda is my best friend, I thought. She has been for 6 years. I love her the way you love your closest friend, the way that's real and deep and uncomplicated. Uncomplicated, I thought. Is that what this is? I didn't answer myself. I was very good at not answering myself. Saturday was the gallery and then the park. Sunday was slow. Coffee at a place she liked near my apartment. Afternoon work at my kitchen table while she read on the couch. Comfortable and quiet in the way that being with her was always comfortable and quiet. And then it was Sunday evening. And we were both slightly sad in the way that Sunday evenings at the end of good weekends produce sadness. And we were sitting on my roof with wine because the weather was still holding and the city looked the way it looks in October. All that glow and going. "I've been thinking," she said. "About what?" She turned her glass in her hands. She did this sometimes, a small rotation of the stem, barely visible, when she was choosing what to say next. "About that thing I said I didn't have words for yet," she said. I went very still. "Do you have words now?" I asked. She looked at me, directly, in the particular way that she looked at things she was taking seriously. "I'm working on them," she said. We didn't talk about it anymore that night. She left the next morning, an early train, a project meeting she couldn't move. She hugged me at the door, the same as always. And then she pulled back and looked at me for one extra second. Just one, just enough to be noticeable. And said, "I'll call you." "I know you will," I said. She left. I closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment, next to the narrow table where she'd put her bag. The table was empty now. It looked wrong. Empty. I went to my desk. I opened the schematic. I rerouted the floor plan toward the view. It worked immediately, effortlessly, exactly the way she'd said it would. I stared at it for a long time. I was not thinking about the floor plan. November arrived the way November does, abruptly, with a kind of authority that makes you feel like October never really existed. Like the warmth and the turning leaves were something you dreamed. The light changed. The city got its winter edge. I worked. I didn't sleep quite as well as I had before the wedding, but I told myself this was seasonal, was the project, was any number of things that had nothing to do with the way certain phone calls had started to carry a particular weight I didn't know how to put down. Fernanda called on a Wednesday. It was 9 at night, our usual hour, the hour that had been our usual hour for years, without either of us ever deciding it. "Tell me something good," she said, which was how she sometimes started calls when she'd had a hard day. "I finished the schematic," I said. "The floor plan thing. The way you said." "Did it work?" "Perfectly. Irritatingly perfectly." "Why irritating?" "Because you figured it out in 30 seconds. "I had the outside view," she said. "It's always easier to see from outside." "Is it?" I said. "A beat." "Sometimes," she said. I tucked my feet up on the couch. The apartment was quiet around me. That specific Brooklyn quiet that isn't really quiet, but that I'd grown to love. The low-level urban hum that meant I was home. "How was your day?" I asked. "Long," she said. "The project in Cambridge is fighting me. The clients keep asking for things they don't actually want, which means I have to figure out what they actually want, and then gently guide them toward realizing it without making them feel like I'm steering. That sounds exhausting." "It's my whole job," she said, and I could hear the smile in it. People tell you what they think they want. Your job is to hear what they need. "That's a good description of design," I said. "It's a good description of a lot of things," she said. We talked for 2 hours. We always talked for 2 hours. But somewhere in the middle of that call, maybe an hour in, maybe a little more, I became aware of something I'd been not aware of for weeks. Something I'd been carefully looking adjacent to, without ever looking directly at. She was still thinking about the thing she didn't have words for. I could hear it in the way she asked questions. She asked me about the last person I'd dated. She asked whether I'd thought about dating again. She asked, carefully, and without seeming to be doing anything except asking, what I thought about what I wanted. Not what I was building, not what I was working toward, but what I actually wanted out of the part of life that wasn't work. I answered carefully. I gave her honest answers about Diane, about the 3 years, about why it had ended. I gave her an honest answer about not quite knowing what I wanted. "What do you mean, not knowing?" she said. "I mean that I had a map," I said, "that I thought I understood. And then I tried to follow it, and it didn't work. And I'm not sure the map was wrong exactly, but something about the way I was reading it." I stopped. "The way you were reading it," she said quietly. Yes, I said. A silence. Not uncomfortable. The particular silence between us that felt like thinking together. I think I understand that, she said. Do you? I said. Have you had a map that didn't work? Another silence. Longer this time. Yes, she said. More recently than I would have expected. I should have asked. I knew I should have asked. She was offering me something, handing me an opening that I could have stepped through. But I felt the ground shift slightly under the conversation and I turned. I turned the way I'd been turning for weeks, and said something else, something safer, something that slid us back onto familiar terrain. She let me do it. That's what I didn't understand until later. She let me do it every time. She would bring us to the edge and offer me a hand, and if I didn't take it, she would step back and wait. She wasn't going to push me. She was going to wait until I was ready to push myself. The trouble was, I didn't know I was being waited for. Here's the thing about being afraid of something that you also want very much. The fear doesn't feel like fear, necessarily. It doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as practicality, as common sense, as experience, as a reasonable assessment of what's real. It feels from the inside like wisdom. I was very wise. I was full of wisdom about why what I was starting to suspect I felt was not what I felt, about why the timing was wrong, about why Fernanda was my best friend, who had always been my best friend, and who meant too much to me to risk on something I couldn't be certain about why certainty was the important thing, that you needed to be certain before you could do anything, and I wasn't certain, and therefore the correct thing was to wait until I was, which might be never, which was fine, which was entirely fine. I rehearsed this argument to myself over multiple consecutive weeks. It was a very good argument. I found it completely convincing. The only problem was that I was also lying awake at 2 a.m, thinking about the way she'd said only the things I care about. In December, she came to New York for what had become another ritual, the last weekend before the holidays, before everyone dispersed to family and obligation, and the particular suspended reality of the year's end. We had done this for 4 years. The museum, the tree, the specific diner in the West Village, that we both pretended was unremarkable while clearly having a great deal of feeling about. She arrived on a Friday. The city had Christmas in it, the lights, the cold, the particular energy of collective anticipation. She came in from the cold, looking like someone who belonged in the cold, a long coat and a scarf wrapped in a specific way that I had, without deciding to, memorized. We walked. We talked. We had dinner. And then, on Saturday night, we were at the diner. The particular booth we always got when we could, the one near the back with the window that faced the street. Coffee, pie, the low noise of a restaurant doing good business on a cold December night. She was across from me. She had her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. She always held coffee cups this way, with both hands, as if she were warming more than her palms. I have something to tell you, she said. My stomach moved. Okay, I said. I've been trying to find the right way to say it for a while, she said, and I've been waiting for the right moment. But I think maybe there isn't a right moment. I think I've been using the idea of the right moment to avoid the actual moment. You're not usually avoidant, I said. I'm not usually in this particular situation, she said. I held my coffee cup. The diner noise went on around us. Somewhere nearby, a woman laughed at something. A full, unself-conscious laugh that seemed to belong to a different, simpler evening. Fernanda, I said. I know, she said. You know what? I know what you're about to say. Something careful. Something that starts with, we should be clear about what we are, or, I don't want to make things weird, or, that's not fair, I said. I know it's not entirely fair, she said. I'm saying it anyway. She met my eyes. Samira. I've been in love with you for somewhere between 1 year and 6 years, and I'm genuinely not sure which, and what happened at the wedding was me almost saying something and losing my nerve at the last second, and I am tired of being careful with this. I'm tired of having words for it and keeping them in a drawer. The diner kept going. The coffee was still hot. The lights were still the particular yellow warm of a place that has been operating long enough to know what light its customers need. I looked at her. She looked at me. She looked calm. She looked the way she always looked when she was saying a true thing. That specific steadiness, like she'd already made peace with the saying of it regardless of what came after. I was not calm. I was the opposite of calm. I was sitting in a booth in a diner in the West Village in December, and the woman across from me had just said the thing that rearranged the furniture of everything I thought I understood about my own life, and I felt something that I can only describe as the sensation of a room coming into focus, that I had been seeing blurred for a very long time. I started. "You don't have to say anything right now," she said. "Fernanda." "I mean it," she said. I'm not asking you for something right now. I just needed to stop carrying it alone. You can take as long as you need." I stared at her. "You've been carrying this alone?" "For a while," she said. "Why didn't—" I stopped. Because I knew why. Because every time she'd offered me an opening, I'd turned away from it. Because she knew me, and she knew that pushing would only make me go further in. "You've been waiting for me," I said. "Yes," she said. "Fernanda." "I know. I don't know what to say," I said, which was true, which was the truest thing I'd said in months. "Then don't say anything yet," she said. "Finish your pie. I'm serious. It's very good pie. And I'm not going to let the emotional weight of this ruin very good pie." I looked at her for another long second. Then I laughed. One of those laughs that comes from a place you didn't know had been under pressure. The kind that feels like pressure releasing. The kind that makes everything slightly blurry around the edges. "Okay," I said. We finished the pie. We did not talk about what she'd said. We talked about other things. Quiet, easy things. The kind of things you talk about when you're both sitting with something too large for words and you've agreed, without saying so, to let it sit for now. She left the next morning. She hugged me goodbye at the door. This time I was aware of the hug. I was aware of her arms. I was aware of the particular way she hugged. The realness of it. The lack of performance. I was aware of not wanting to step back. I stepped back. "I'll call you," she said. "I know you will," I said. She left. I closed the door. I stood in my apartment for a long time. Outside, the city went on being December. The lights, the cold, the particular suspended feeling of a world that was pausing before something. I was in love with my best friend. I was terrified. I did not call her. Not that day. Not for 3 days after. I texted, short texts, functional texts, the kind that established I was alive and not ignoring her, but that didn't touch the thing in the diner, the thing now living in the open space between us where nothing had lived before. She let me do it. She responded to the texts without pressure. She didn't ask when I was going to call. She didn't ask what I was thinking. She sent me a photo of the Cambridge project on Tuesday, a sketch she was working on, a particular curve in the pathway that she was pleased with, and the caption said simply, "Look at this curve." I looked at the curve. It was a good curve. I wrote back, "It's a beautiful curve." She sent a heart. That was it. She was giving me space. She knew what I needed, and she was giving it to me, the way she always gave me what I needed. And I was sitting inside that space trying to understand myself well enough to know what to do with what I now knew. I called her on a Thursday, 8 days after the diner. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. I had planned, in the days between, what I was going to say. I had thought about it with the kind of architectural precision I brought to problems I was trying to solve, identifying the variables, understanding the constraints, working out the logic. I had a version of the speech. It was careful and honest, and it said what I felt and what I was afraid of and what I needed. Then I heard her voice, and the speech disappeared. "I don't know how to do this," I said. "I want to be honest with you, and I am. I am always honest with you. But I'm also scared in a way I haven't been scared about something in a long time, and I'm trying to understand whether the scared is about this specifically or about—" I stopped. "I'm making this complicated." "It is complicated," she said. "Is it?" "It doesn't have to be," she said. "Or it can be. Both are true. Fernanda. Samira. I've been thinking about you," I said. "I've been thinking about you since Connecticut. Maybe before Connecticut. And I don't know how long I've been thinking about you this way, but it's been a while, and I've been very good at not looking at it. And you told me in the diner that you've been in love with me for somewhere between 1 year and 6 years. "Yes," she said. And I sat with that, and I stopped again, took a breath. "I'm not very good at saying this part." "I know," she said. "Say it anyway." "I think I love you," I said. "I think I've loved you. Not just the way I've always loved you, which is real. That's always been real. But also in this other way that I've been not looking at for I don't know how long. And I'm scared of that. I'm scared of what it means. I'm scared of what it would cost if it didn't work. You are the most important person in my life, and the thought of Samira, of losing that Samira." I stopped. "I'm scared too," she said. "I'm scared of the same things. The friendship, the history, the what if it doesn't work. All of it." I sat with this for somewhere between 1 and 6 years without saying it because I was scared of all of that. "Then how did you say it in the diner?" "Because not saying it stopped being possible," she said. "Because carrying it alone cost more than the risk of saying it." I sat in my apartment. The December lights were outside my window. The strands of white that I'd put up weeks ago and that I'd barely noticed since. They were on a timer. They came on every night at 5. I'd set the timer in October, before any of this, when I was a version of myself who hadn't yet started paying attention to the particular warmth of someone's arm against mine. "I need time," I said. "Okay," she said. "Not because I don't. Not because I'm uncertain about you. I think I'm most certain about you of anything. But there are things I need to understand about myself, about this, about what I want." "Take the time," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Fernanda." "Yes?" "Thank you," I said, "for saying it, in the diner, for saying it first." A pause, and then her voice, very quiet. "You would have gotten there." "Eventually," I said. "You would have gotten there," she said again, like she believed it. Like she'd been waiting for it all along. We talked for another hour. Not about this, about other things, easier things. But the conversation had a different quality now, the kind of quality that comes when something true has been said in a room, and the room hasn't fallen apart. Lighter. Clearer. When we hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time. I looked at the lights. I thought about what it meant to have a map you didn't know how to read, and what it felt like when someone who loved you stood next to you and said, "Here, I think it might go this way." I thought about how long I had been navigating by a map that hadn't quite worked. The relationship with Diane that was real but never quite complete. The feeling of looking across tables and feeling distance I couldn't close. The years of telling myself I was fine, I was doing well. The map was the right map. I just needed more practice reading it. I thought about Fernanda. The 6 years. The particular quality of everything she was to me. The steadiness, the clarity, the way she looked at things, the way she looked at me. I thought about the diner, about what she'd said, about how she'd said it, calm and clear and without demand, just the truth, offered, and then let go. I thought, I am in love with my best friend, and I have been for longer than I knew, and the most frightening part of that isn't the love. The most frightening part is what it means about the parts of myself I haven't finished understanding yet. And then I thought, you don't have to understand everything before you can begin. I sat with that for a while. The lights outside came on. 5 o'clock, right on time. But before I tell you what happened next, if you've made it this far, you know something about this feeling. That particular fear. Not of the person, but of what loving them asks you to know about yourself. If this story is touching something in you right now, hit the like button. It costs you nothing, and it means everything for me to keep bringing you stories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe and hit the bell. That way YouTube tells you the moment the next story drops. Now I need to ask you something in the comments. Have you ever loved someone for longer than you knew? Have you ever realized, all at once, that the most important person in your life had always been something more? And the hardest part wasn't telling them. It was telling yourself. Write it down for me. I read every single one. And tell me where you're watching from. I heart every city. Now, back to Samira. January is not a forgiving month. I'm not saying this as meteorology. I mean it the way New Yorkers mean it. The specific quality of January in a city where winter arrives not as scenery, but as fact, where the cold is structural, where the short days feel less like darkness and more like the city putting itself into a kind of necessary austerity. I needed January. I needed the austerity. I had told Fernanda I needed time, and she had given it to me with the characteristic ease of someone who gives without keeping score. We still talked. The cadence was the same. But there was something new between us now. Something that lived in the pauses between topics. Something that we were both aware of without circling. A thing that had been named, that couldn't be unnamed. I was trying to figure out what I was. That sounds strange, maybe, at 38. But it was the truest description of what I was doing. I was sitting with questions I had spent years not sitting with. Not from deliberate avoidance, but from the genuine belief that they'd been settled. That I'd already done this accounting, and the numbers added up, and I didn't need to run them again. The numbers hadn't added up. Or rather, they'd added up to an answer, but I'd been misreading the sum. I called my friend Layla one evening in mid-January. Layla had known me for 15 years, since we were in graduate school together, and she had the particular gift of not making me feel judged for things I said to her. I had not told her about Fernanda. I had not told anyone about Fernanda. I had been carrying this in the same drawer Fernanda had been carrying hers. "Can I tell you something I don't know how to say?" I asked. "Those are your favorite kinds of things to tell me," she said. "I might be in love with Fernanda," I said. Pause. "Samira." "I know. Samira," she said again in a different tone. Something between exasperation and the specific warmth of someone who has been waiting a long time for you to say an obvious thing. "Why do you say might be?" "Because I'm still figuring out what—" "You've been in love with that woman since the day you told me about her," Layla said. "That was 6 years ago. You described her for 45 minutes the day after you met her and then said, 'She's a good professional contact.' I did not say anything because you clearly needed to arrive at this in your own time, and also because I was hoping I was wrong, because watching someone be that obtuse about themselves is genuinely painful." I was quiet for a moment. 45 minutes, I said. 45, she said. I timed it. I sat with that. "She told me she's in love with me," I said. A longer pause this time. What did you do? Layla asked. I told her I needed time. Of course you did, she said, not unkindly. And what do you need the time for? I need to understand what this means, I said. About me. About what I want. About the life I've been building and whether the blueprint was right, Layla said. I went still. Yes, I said. Samira, she said, I've watched you build very carefully for 15 years. I've watched you make good decisions and smart choices and real achievements. And I've also watched you live in your own blueprint the way some people live in a house they built themselves, proud of the craftsmanship, but not entirely sure it's the house they would have chosen if they'd started from scratch. I didn't say anything. The blueprint was built with the information you had at the time, she said. That's not failure. That's just how it works. The question is what you do with the information you have now. I looked at my window. January outside. The lights of the city doing what they do. I'm scared, I said. Of course you are, she said. You're about to choose something true over something familiar. That's always scary. What if I'm wrong about what it is? What if I... Samira, she said. You just described this woman to me for 20 minutes. You're not wrong. I thought about what Layla said for the rest of January. I thought about blueprints, about the information you have at the time, about the house you'd build if you were starting from scratch. I thought about Diane, about the 3 years, about the real happiness and the real distance, about the specific feeling of looking across a dinner table and not being able to close something. I thought about that with new information now, and what that new information showed me about what had been missing. Not in Diane, in me, in what I'd understood about what I was capable of wanting, what I was capable of recognizing. I thought about the map that hadn't quite worked, the years of reading it carefully and following it faithfully and arriving at places that were good but not quite right, not wrong, not failure, but not quite right. And I thought about Fernanda. I thought about 6 years of everything she was, the constancy, the clarity, the way she saw me, the particular texture of being known by her. I thought about the wedding, the train, the roof in October, the diner in December. I thought about the way her arm had felt against mine, and the way her voice sounded on bad days, and the way she'd offered me openings for weeks while I turned away from them. I thought about the moment, in the diner, when she'd said she was tired of keeping words in a drawer. I thought about my drawer, full of words, full of things I'd put away for reasons that felt like wisdom and turned out to be fear. On the last Friday of January, I called her at 9. Hi, she said. Hi, I said. How are you? I'm done, I said. A pause. Done with what? She asked. With the time, I said. I've taken the time. I've thought about it. I've talked to Layla. I've been very thorough, which you probably expected. I did expect that, she said, and I could hear the smile. I want to talk, I said. Not on the phone, in person. I want to come to Boston. Samira, next weekend, I said. If that works, I want to come to Boston and I want to talk. A long pause. Long enough that I counted my heartbeats. 4, 5, 6. Yes, she said. Next weekend works. Okay, I said. Okay, she said. We talked for another hour. Normal things, easy things. But there was something different in the conversation. A warmth that had been there for 6 years, now unobstructed. Like a window that had always been there, finally opened. The week before Boston was the longest week I can remember. Not because of dread. That's the thing I want to say clearly. It wasn't dread. It was something else. Something more like the feeling of standing at the start of a path you've never walked, where you can't see the end, where the only thing you know for certain is that you chose to begin. I was choosing. That's what I'd figured out, in January, in all the careful thinking. That the fear wasn't a sign to stop. That the fear was just what it felt like to be standing at the edge of something true, looking at it fully for the first time. Fear and wrong aren't the same thing. I had spent a long time confusing them. On Thursday night, I called my sister Maya. Maya was the person in my family I was closest to. We had the particular relationship of siblings who fought terribly in childhood and then discovered each other in adulthood, who had found a way to be genuinely close after many years of figuring out how. She knew me well. She was honest in a way that sometimes hurt and was always useful. "I'm going to Boston this weekend," I said. "To see Fernanda," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." A pause. "Is this—" she started. "Yes," I said. Another pause, and then, "I always thought she was the best person you knew." I held my phone. "You've only met her twice." "I know," she said. "Twice was enough. The way you talk about her, and then meeting her, and watching you together." She paused. "She looks at you like you're the most interesting room she's ever been in." I didn't say anything for a moment. "Maya," I said. "I know," she said. "Go to Boston." "I'm scared," I said. "Samira," she said. "You've been scared before. You built an entire practice from scratch when you were scared. You moved to New York when you were scared. Being scared is just you. You do things afraid. That's why they're worth doing." I took a breath. "What if the people I care about don't understand? What if—" "The people who matter will understand," she said. "And the ones who don't matter won't matter. That's very simple." "The truth usually is," she said. "It's only the getting there that's complicated." I took the Saturday morning train to Boston. I sat in a window seat and watched the Northeast go by. New York becoming Connecticut, becoming Rhode Island, becoming Massachusetts. The particular geography of a life lived between two cities, two women, 2 years of trains between them. I thought about all the other trains, all the other times I had made this trip, what I had been thinking on each one, what I had been carrying. I was carrying something different now. Not lighter, exactly, but different. Chosen differently. Known differently. She met me at South Station. She was in a coat I hadn't seen before. Dark wool, simple, exactly the kind of thing she'd wear. She was standing slightly to the left of the main flow of people in that particular way she had of occupying space without taking more than she needed. And she was watching the doors. She saw me before I saw her clearly. I saw her see me, watched her expression move through something I couldn't quite read before it settled into something that was familiar, and also, today, different. We walked toward each other. "Hi," I said. "Hi," she said. We stood for a moment, and then she said, "You came." "I said I was coming," I said. "I know," she said, "but people say things and then sometimes—" "I'm glad you came." "I'm glad I came," I said. We walked out into the Boston winter. Cold and clear, the particular light of a city that knows how to be cold. She knew where we were going. She had suggested a walk, and she knew the city with the ease of someone who had made it hers. We walked for a while without talking much. That was okay. That was always okay with us. The silence had never been uncomfortable, and it wasn't now. It just had something new in it, something we were both aware of. Then she said, "Tell me where you are." "I'm in Boston," I said. "Samira." I stopped walking. We were on a bridge, a small footbridge over a frozen section of the park, the kind of place that is specifically designed to be a moment in someone's story. I stood on the bridge and I looked at her. She was looking at me. There it was again. That look I'd spent 6 years cataloging without naming. The fullness of it. the attention that felt like recognition. "I'm here," I said. "That's where I am. I thought about everything you said in December, and everything I've been not saying for longer than I knew, and I stopped. The careful speech wasn't working again. The architecture of it kept collapsing. So I said the simple thing. "I love you," I said. "I think I've loved you for a long time. I know I'm late to this, and I know you've been patient in a way I don't fully deserve. And I'm still scared. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. But I would rather be scared with you than comfortable without you. And that's..." My voice did something I hadn't expected it to do. "That's the most honest thing I know how to say." Fernanda was very still. Then she said, "That's enough." "Is it?" I said. "Yes," she said. "That's enough, Samira. That's exactly enough." She stepped toward me, and I didn't step back. For the first time in 6 years of being close enough to touch, I didn't step back. She reached out and took my hand. One hand, both of mine. Her fingers wrapping around mine with the particular firmness of someone who is holding something carefully, because it matters. We stood on the bridge in the January cold, the frozen park around us, the city going about its Saturday. I looked at her. She looked at me. And the thing that had been in the drawer, both of our drawers, for both of our lengths of time, it was in the open now. It had always been real. But now it was also visible. Now it was also held. "What happens now?" I said. "Now we figure it out," she said. "Together. The way we figure everything out. We've never figured out anything like this." "No," she said. "But we're good at the work." I laughed. That pressure release laugh again, the one that came from the place that had been under strain. "We are," I said. "We're very good at the work." She squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. We stood there a moment longer, 2 women on a bridge in January, holding hands. In the particular stillness of a moment when something has landed after being in the air for a long time. Then she said, "I know a place that has good coffee." "Of course you do," I said, "and very good pastries." "Lead the way," I said. She did. February came. And with February came the part of the story that nobody tells you about. The part after the bridge, after the hand-holding, after the first clear thing you've said in a long time. The part where the world, which was not on the bridge with you and did not hear you, continues to operate by its previous understanding of your life. My mother called on a Tuesday in early February. She lived in Michigan. My parents both did. And they were the kind of parents I loved, and who loved me and with whom I had, over the years, arrived at a careful and mostly functional version of communication that involved a lot of genuine affection and a certain amount of managed distance on both our parts. My mother called on Tuesdays because that was what she did. She would ask about work, I would tell her about work, we would talk about my sister, and then we would talk about whatever needed discussing. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm good," I said. And then I said, before I'd decided to, before the architecture of a careful approach could form, "Mom, I need to tell you something." A pause. "Okay," she said. "I've been seeing someone," I said. It's new, but it's also important to me. I wanted to tell you." "Who is it?" she said. I took a breath. "It's Fernanda," I said. A silence, long enough that I counted it. "You're Fernanda," she said. Not a question. "From Boston?" "Yes." Another silence. My mother is a woman of genuine religious faith and a complicated relationship with things she doesn't understand. She loves me. She has always loved me. But love and understanding are not the same thing. And I'd known, in some part of myself I'd been careful with, that this call would be hard. Samira, she said. Mom. I need to think about this, she said. I don't know how to. This isn't something I expected. I know, I said. Are you. She stopped, started again. Are you sure this is. Yes, I said. I'm sure. Another silence. I need to talk to your father, she said. Okay, I said. And I need to think, she said. I love you. You know I love you. I know you do, I said. I just need time, she said. I almost laughed, though I didn't. I almost said, I understand exactly what that's like. Take the time, I said instead. I'm not going anywhere. We hung up. I sat in my apartment and let myself feel the particular ache of a conversation that could have gone differently and didn't, and the particular relief of having said the true thing regardless. I called Fernanda. How did it go? She said. She knew I'd been planning to call my mother, the way she knew everything I was building toward. Not terribly, I said. Not easily either. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be, I said. It's real. This is real, and real things have real weight, and I'm okay with carrying it. A pause, and then quietly. You're not alone in the carrying. I know, I said. I did know. That was the thing. I knew it, for the first time in years, in a way that went below the surface of knowing. I was not alone in the carrying. The weeks that followed were not easy. My mother didn't call for 2 weeks after that conversation. When she did, she was careful and slightly formal in a way that she'd never been with me before, and I understood that she was still figuring out how to hold this, and I gave her the space to figure it out. My father called separately, on a Sunday, and surprised me. He was quieter than my mother in his processing, and what he said was simply, "Your happiness matters to me. Tell me more about her." So I told him about her. About the panel where we met. About 6 years. About the way she thought, the way she listened, the Cambridge project, and the good curve in the pathway. He listened and asked a few questions and at the end said, "She sounds like someone who would have been worth waiting for." I had to take a breath. "She is," I said. My mother came around, slowly, over the next months. Not all at once. Not without difficulty. There were conversations that were hard, and conversations that were harder. There were times I felt the particular loneliness of being in a part of your life that the people who love you are still catching up to. But my mother loved me. That had never been in question. And love, when it is real, moves toward understanding, even when understanding takes time. Layla said, when I told her about it, "You did the hard thing. The hard thing never stops being hard. It just stops feeling like something you can avoid." She was right. At work, there was less drama than I expected and more quietly than I'd feared. My colleague Priya, who had been my closest professional confidant for the 3 years since I'd gone independent, had apparently, she told me over coffee in March, suspected something for much longer than I had. "You mentioned her constantly," Priya said. "Every phone call, every weekend plan." Fernanda said, "Fernanda thinks. I thought it was interesting that you never mentioned anyone else the same way." "I didn't realize I was doing that," I said. "I know you didn't," she said. "That's what made it obvious." There were a few clients who looked at me slightly differently when they encountered Fernanda as part of my life, in the way that some people look slightly differently at things that don't match their existing understanding of the world. Most of them moved past it. Some of them didn't, and I lost a project I would have liked to have because of it. That was real. That was a cost. I paid it. Not easily. Not without some nights in March where I lay awake doing the math on what a different, more careful version of this could have looked like. A version where I moved more slowly, disclosed less, protected more. And then I would think about the bridge. about her hand in both of mine in the January cold. And I would think, that's not a different version. That's a lesser version. And I am done building lesser versions of things. The specific cost I hadn't expected came in April. Fernanda and I we'd been figuring it out, as she said we would. The distance was still there. New York and Boston, the trains, the long weekends that had always been our rhythm, but that now had a different quality, a quality of building towards something. We were building towards something. We both knew it. We hadn't decided exactly what yet, but the decision was forming the way good decisions form. Quietly, steadily, in the space between conversations. In April, she called me on a Monday morning, earlier than she usually called. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. I felt something tighten. "Okay." "The Cambridge project is finishing in June," she said. "And I've been thinking about what comes next, for the practice. And there's been an offer." "An offer?" "A firm in New York," she said. "A partnership offer. Collaborative work, significant projects, the kind of scale I've wanted to work at for a while." I was very still. "In New York," I said. "Yes." "Fernanda, I'm not deciding because of you," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not going to make a life decision of this size because of where we are right now. This is its own decision. But it's in the same direction. And I wanted to tell you because I want to think about it honestly. And I can't think about it honestly without telling you." I sat at my desk. The morning light was coming in, that particular early morning clarity before the day gets complicated. "Do you want it?" I said. "The partnership, independent of everything else." "Yes," she said. "I've been thinking about this kind of opportunity for years. The work they do is the work I want to do." "Then you should take it," I said. "Samira, if the work is what you want, you should take it," I said. "And yes, I am aware that you would also be in New York, and I am aware of what that means, and I am also trying very hard not to let how much I want you in New York make me an unreliable person to talk to about this." A pause, and then she laughed. A real one. The specific laugh that was hers, the one I'd been listening to for 6 years, without knowing I was memorizing it. "You're terrible at pretending that doesn't matter," she said. "I know," I said. "But I'm trying." "I love that you're trying," she said. "I love you," I said. A silence, a comfortable one. "I'm going to take the partnership," she said. "Good," I said. "It's the right decision." "It is," she said. "For many reasons." She moved in September. I helped with the move. 2 weekends of the specific, unglamorous, physical labor of relocating a life from one city to another. Boxes and furniture, and the particular chaos of disrupted order, of things in transit, of a life in temporary pieces before it reassembles somewhere new. Her new apartment was in Brooklyn, not near mine. A different neighborhood, a different light. A space that was already becoming distinctly hers in the way her spaces always became hers quickly, with intelligence and intention. On the second Sunday, when the boxes were mostly sorted and the furniture was placed, and we were sitting on her floor eating takeout because the kitchen was still being organized, I looked around at the space. "It's good," I said. "It's going to be good," she said. "It's already good," I said. She looked at me. "How do you know?" "Because I know what your good looks like," I said. "I've been watching it for 6 years." She was quiet for a moment. "Samira," she said. "Yes?" "I've been thinking about something." "You're always thinking about something," I said. "I know," she said. "But this one specifically." She set down her fork. She had that quality again. The settling into something. The particular stillness that meant she was going to say something that mattered. "I've been thinking that I don't want to figure this out by installments anymore." The distance is gone now. The geography excuse is gone. And I've had something I've been waiting for you to. I've been waiting for you to be ready, and I think... Fernanda, I said. I think you're ready, she said. I think I'm ready, I said. We looked at each other. The September light in her not-quite-finished apartment, the boxes with their handwritten labels, the takeout containers between us, the particular beauty of a thing not yet assembled but clearly becoming. I don't want to be careful anymore, I said. Not with this. Not with us. You've never been good at being careful, she said. You think you have been, but the things you care about, you've never been careful. You've been thorough. That's different. Thorough, I said. Thorough, she said. And I would like it very much if you stopped being thorough about us and started just being with us. With me. Is that what you want? I said. It's what I've wanted, she said. For somewhere between 1 and 6 years. I laughed. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. I set down my takeout. I looked at her. At this woman I had loved for 6 years without knowing fully what I was doing. This woman who had waited for me with the particular patience of someone who believed, with evidence, that I would get there. Okay, I said. Let's stop being careful. She smiled. That smile. The one I'd been seeing since a coffee station in Boston. The one I'd been trying to categorize and recategorize and file and refile and had never, in 6 years, fully succeeded in making ordinary. Okay, she said. Let's. We were not careful after that. We were something better than careful. We were there. I want to tell you what choosing looked like on the other side. Because I've told you the fear, and the bridge, and the hand in both of mine in the January cold. I've told you the hard phone call, and the long weeks and the costs that came in April and the September floor. I've told you the thorough and the careful and the long, slow work of learning to stop looking adjacent to the thing I'd been afraid to look at directly. But I want to tell you what it looks like, too, when you've done that, when you've paid the cost, when you've gotten to the other side. It looks like a Saturday morning in November. November again. The year having gone the full distance. The light having changed again the way it changes every year. The cold having its authority back. We are in my apartment. Still mine. Still the Brooklyn apartment with the good light and the bookshelves I built. Because we had spent Friday at hers, and the morning found us here. I was in the kitchen. I was making eggs, because I make eggs on Saturday mornings with a consistency that had become a kind of ritual, the particular pleasure of a competence so practiced it requires no thought. The radio was on, something quiet, instrumental, the kind of morning radio that doesn't demand anything. She was at my kitchen table. She was working, reading something, making notes in the margins of a document with the focused quiet of someone who does their best thinking in the early hours. She had her coffee, both hands wrapped around the cup, as always, warming more than her palms. I was watching her without looking directly at her. The particular peripheral awareness I'd had of her in rooms for 6 years. Now understood. Now named. Now not something I looked adjacent to. She looked up. You're staring, she said. I'm observing, I said. Same thing. Professionally different, I said. She smiled and went back to her notes. I went back to the eggs. And here is the thing I want to say about it. It was ordinary. It was completely, entirely ordinary. A Saturday morning, coffee, eggs, someone you love at your kitchen table. There was nothing dramatic about it. There was nothing that looked, from the outside, like the end of a long journey toward something true. But from the inside, it felt like the feeling of a room finally making sense, of having lived in a space for years, and then one day understanding the way the light actually moves through it, understanding the real dimensions, understanding why certain corners felt certain ways. From the inside, it felt like the difference between building something that almost works and building something that does. She had told me on the Boston Bridge that we would figure it out together, the way we figured everything out. We had figured it out. Not without cost. I want to be clear about that. Not without the hard calls, the difficult months, the nights doing the math on what it cost to choose the true thing over the familiar thing. The cost was real. I paid it, and I would pay it again. But I want to tell you something about what comes after paying it. What comes after is a kitchen in November. What comes after is someone who knows how you take your coffee and makes it before you ask. What comes after is a Saturday, where the most important thing is breakfast, and the second most important thing is whatever she's marking up in those margins. And the third most important thing is the way the morning light comes through the window that faces east. East-facing window, morning reading room. I thought about that, standing at my kitchen stove, about the floor plan that wasn't working, and the rerouting toward the view, and the way she'd figured it out in 30 seconds, because she had the outside view. You're designing around the view. You need to route toward it differently. I had been designing around the view for a long time. The eggs were done. I plated them. I carried them to the table and set one plate in front of her and sat down with mine. She looked at her plate, then at me. Eggs, she said. I was informed you liked eggs, I said. By whom? 6 years of observational data, I said. She picked up her fork. It holds up, she said. We ate. The radio played something I couldn't quite name. Outside the window, November did what November does, cold and honest and exactly itself. I watched her eat, watched her make a mark in her margins between bites, watched the familiar landscape of her hands, her face, the specific quality of her attention when she was working. She looked up again. What? She said. Nothing, I said. She gave me a look. Everything, I said. She set her fork down. She reached across the table, and her hand covered mine, the way she'd held both my hands on the bridge, the same steadiness, the same care. Samira, she said. Fernanda, I said. Are you... She started. Yes, I said. She already knew the question. I already knew the answer. That's how it had always been between us. The knowing before the words, the understanding before the explanation. I just hadn't known what to do with it for a long time. I knew now. I turned my hand over and held hers back. Outside, November. Inside, this. The eggs getting cold in a way that didn't matter at all. The radio playing something quiet and irrelevant. The morning light coming through the east-facing window, doing what morning light does, making everything look a little cleaner, a little more real, a little more worth paying attention to. I had paid the cost. I was here. And I want to tell you. I want to say this clearly, to whoever is listening who is carrying something in their own drawer, who is living adjacent to their own view, who is being very wise about all the reasons the true thing is dangerous and complicated and might not work. The cost of choosing yourself is real. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. The conversations will be hard. Some of the people you love will need time you wish they didn't need. Some of the things you've built will need to be rebuilt. And some of the things you thought were solid will turn out to have been made of something else. But on the other side of all of that is a November morning. And eggs that are getting cold in a way that doesn't matter. And someone who holds your hand the way someone holds something they've been waiting a long time to hold carefully. Choose the view. Route toward it differently. It's worth it. I promise you it's worth it. I finally had what I had spent years designing around instead of toward. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't certain. It was better than both of those things. It was chosen. It was mine. It was real. And sometimes the most courageous thing you'll ever do is stop being thorough about your own happiness and start just living it. If this story touched something in you, write chosen in the comments. That way, I know you made it all the way here with me. And if you want to stay in this space, stories about love that ask something real of you, click the video that's on your screen right now. A big hug, and until the next story.